I've been on mute. Hi, kitty cats. Today's topic is all about my big problems. I took a week off and centered myself around my purpose, and now I'm ready to share that purpose with you. So, I am Amethysta Herrick. I'm an author and a podcaster. You can check the links below for more information about me and the work that I do. My personal website is the first link there. That's amethysta.io. You will find all of my social media networks, and hopefully you'll follow me for updates on everything I do. The second one down is my professional website. It's gender-identitytoday.com. All of my articles and podcasts and live streams are published there, as well as work from other contributors. So if you like this content, please consider subscribing at gender-identitytoday.com. You can get a subscription for as low as $2 a month, not too much. And if you'd like to contribute content to Gender Identity Today, please contact me through my personal website contact page. So the top link /content. And the last one there is if you would like to leave a tip, there's a coffee link for you there. You can send a tip as you see fit. So in the past week, I took some time off, as we all know. The way I put it was that I felt that I had lost connection with the content that I was creating. And at the very least, I felt like the content wasn't going to be helpful to others. Now, I recognize very well that's my own opinion, and maybe not even a good one, because I have the tendency to diminish the value of everything that I do. Furthermore, I had actually just completed a major project. I had the whole Amy in Thailand thing. I was making videos, and I made a bunch of friends, but they were videos. I was getting ready to go to Thailand. I went to Thailand. I had surgery. I was healing up. And then I was coming home from Thailand. And all of a sudden, I wasn't able to tap into that energy. I didn't have this big project sitting around anymore that I could just connect to people through. And I realized also, and this was after I got out of the hospital after surgery, and then as I've gone on a little bit more, especially after I got back to the U.S., I found that gender-affirming surgery opened up a lot of energy. And actually, I'll stick a link in the notes. There is a link in the notes to a live stream where I talk about how that energy changed. But when I got back to the United States, I was watching views on my YouTube channel drop. And some of that is because YouTube was finding my audience better. At first I thought, oh my gosh, everybody hates me. And so I thought I need to just work harder. And especially since I had opened up a lot of energy, I really should, I thought, be able to triple my output. And that way is all the content that goes out there, people are going to love it, and I'm going to get, everybody's going to be my friend again. Honestly, this is a typical response for me, has been a typical response for me to overwork myself over the course of my entire career now since 1998 when I got out of graduate school. And so I thought I would make an atypical response to that response. I would take a week off instead of trying to triple my output and probably burn myself out. I will admit I was very frightened. I was going to lose all of my momentum. I thought I was going to lose all of my friends, all of the reason of everything I've done in the past 2 years. And I guess it wasn't entirely true, but what I figured I would do is take that moment, take this chance to reformulate my big problems. So, a good question here, what exactly is a big problem? So I'm going to give you a little bit of insight into the kind of person I am. When I started writing in 2022, I picked up many different streams of research, but the first one was about myself, and I had to think about my own introspection. Now, I've written in a journal for probably not quite 20 years, but that's not searchable. It's persisting my thoughts, and it's certainly helping me feel, like I get those thoughts out, and I've processed a lot of things, but it's really hard to find anything in those journals. I mean, I've got books and books, sitting in a storage area somewhere. So I wanted to find a way to persist all of the thoughts I had so that I could at the very least find them again. So, as per usual, I went to books. Now, there are two books that I used in particular that I want to talk about, and you will find links to both of those in the notes to this live stream. And full disclosure too, those are Amazon affiliate links. So if you buy anything through them, then I will get compensated for them. And if you do, thank you so much for introducing some compensation there. So the first book, and I'm not gonna get his name right, I'm sure. Sunki Ahrens, I think. The book is called How to Take Smart Notes. And maybe you think, well, how hard is it to take notes? It's not that difficult. That book is all about a concept called a Zettelkasten, which I believe translated literally simply means card box. I mean, a box in which you put index cards with your thoughts. But an interesting aspect of a Zettelkasten is that you try to put relationships. You want to make sure that there are relationships among data, because the person who developed this technique, he believed that it's really the relationships among data that give the data value. And we see this all over the place. You know, if you've ever tagged anything, if you use like a hashtag, if you put a tag on a file, if you've used folders in you know, like an Explorer kind of thing, even just your file names, it gives some context to whatever it is that's inside the file. So that's a relationship. You've established relationships among data. And I got to tell you, at first I thought, yeah, I mean, I'm sure that'll be interesting, but like, is it going to be that interesting? And I accidentally proved the value to it. It was really accidental, but I was reading that's two fingers. I was reading 3 different books. I don't know if it was sequential or simultaneous, but I know I read 3 different books. One of them was I believe an 18th century treatise on Western esoteric tradition, so magic, Western magical tradition. The other one was a 1970s book about management, the purpose and the measurement of management. And the last one was a relatively recent book about systems theory. And as I was reading these books, I was taking some notes and I was trying to put some relationships among my notes. I realized there were relationships in my thought that when I looked at like a higher level, all 3 of those books were actually related in my head, which maybe sounds somewhat improbable, but I swear it was true. I ended up realizing that, you know, the magical book had ideas about, how to do some introspection. The management book had ideas about how humans interact. And then the systems theory book actually put on top of that this idea that you don't want to optimize the subsystems, you want to optimize an overall system. So through those 3 books, I actually came up with a bigger and better at that point on my own. And so it proved it to myself. You don't have to believe that entirely, but there you go. So as I was moving forward, especially once I started writing, this is at the end of 2022, I found another book by an author named Tiago Forte, and he has a book called Building a Second Brain. Tiago Forte took the idea of relationships giving information value and said really no knowledge, no data, no information has any value unless it relates to something we even care about. Now, as a scientist, originally I went, I don't think that's true, because really the whole process of science is to find knowledge purely for its own sake. You know, are we going to find a cure for cancer? Maybe, but we're doing, academic research. We'll find out. Are we going to build a better television set? Maybe, but let's do research and let's see what ends up happening. So I read that and I thought, I don't know if that's true. But Tiago Forte, he ends up saying that really what we want is information that either supports or contradicts what we already believe or represents new knowledge about the universe as we see it. And so it has to relate to something we already believe, with something we already care about. And his book is a big system on how to categorize knowledge based on its utility to us. And it was in Tiago Forte's book that I learned this idea of big problems. And I realized it took me 10 minutes to get here. But big problems end up being those questions that you've just got to answer, even if it takes the rest of your life. If you don't ever find the answer to those questions, that's fine, because you've spent your entire life looking for them. And the way Tiago Forte put it is that if you have a question and it's not that long term, to the point where you can study this for the rest of your life, it's only a part of another bigger problem that you want to try and find. So these are problems that honestly are going to be worth studying for years. And along those lines, they're worth studying as a form of recreation, which is a bigger point. These problems don't have to be profound. They don't have to result in a degree. They don't have to result in a job. They have to result in your personal reward for working on them. And that's it. Like for me, I love to read about mythology. I love to read about spirituality and magic, Western magical tradition. I also love music theory, musical tones, and none of that has resulted in a degree or a job. In fact, they might actually have pulled me out of jobs, who knows? But as a content creator, I realized big problems are a critical part of our work, because what it does is focus what we're going to create. And that's across the spectrum of all the media that we're going to target. It's going to focus what it is we're going to create. And it ends up being a well of inspiration that you return to over and over. Now, I did this initial exercise in November of 2022. I believe it was November 2nd. And for the record, November 1st, I decided I was going to become a full-time content creator, November 1st, 2022. So very quickly, I said, well, I better come up with reasons why I'm doing this. I revisited my big problems in April 2023, and that was because I had completed my social transition. And as I felt a loss of connection to my purpose, I realized what I had just done recently was complete my medical gender transition. And so it told me flat out, now is the time to revisit those big problems again. So let me talk about what those problems are. They come down into three major categories, which is human identity, discovering and manifesting who we are, and science and psychology. So here we go. Let's talk about human identity. Human identity, for some reason my link's not working. There we go. Human identity, I think first about the idea of an origin of identity. And I've talked about this before in videos, and I've written rather voluminously about this on my website. I believe that we have this unchanging set of core knowledge. And I think this is best demonstrated if I asked you, what's your favorite vegetable? And if you go, well, it's broccoli, and I say, no, it's not, it's asparagus, I'm wrong. These are things that we know, but we don't know why we know them other than saying, look, because I know. I believe that represents our really low-level motivations and desires. And I believe that core set of knowledge fuels our identity and, by extension, our gender. So recently, in the past, it's 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think now, a couple weeks ago anyway, I had this long conversation with Jasmine Vine, which, Jasmine, if you're out there, hi. Oh, you're not out there because it's like 2 a.m. for you, probably asleep. Jasmine actually made an Instagram, I think it was a story. Hopefully it wasn't a reel. Hopefully this didn't stay there for too long. But she talked about this headache she had after, considering this origin of identity and how it contributes to everything. Because her question was, well, how can they change? If it is an unchanging set of core knowledge, how do they change? And I have thought of this as like a pearl. It's identity by accretion. It's the way I think of it. You have the origin of identity in the middle, like a grain of sand. And as you go through your life, the experience accretes on the outside. And so the core beliefs, ultimately, when you go down to see what do I truly believe, it's filtered through this experience, the rest of the pearl, as it was. Now, I realized that when I wrote that article, maybe it wasn't very clear. In fact, presumably it wasn't very clear because it wasn't to Jasmine, I guess. But then I've also considered this idea of lenocracy that I talked about a couple of weeks ago in a video, that we allow other people to define our identity. And that's important. That's very important. A concept that I started thinking about very early in my in the writing that I started doing, so it was the end of 2022, is something I simply called the reflection. And this started off actually with my literal reflection in the mirror. I remember going into the bathroom when I just first started hormone therapy. I mean, it would have been in November, I believe, of 2022. So I'd been on hormone therapy for 4 months, I guess, 4 months, 5 months, and 4 months. And I remember washing my hands, and I looked up into the mirror and I went, oh my gosh, I'm starting to see the person that I knew I am on the inside. And it really catalyzed this idea inside me that when we have dysphoria, when we have issues with identity, it's because we see a mismatch between the person we're presenting to our social environment and our internal knowledge of who we are. And this led to a theory of mine that I've called gender as a mediator, that this static knowledge of ourselves that we have in our origin of identity is mediated by a process of identity, a process of gender with the social environment, expectations within the social environment. And really our identity is the pursuit of safety as we express ourselves within the social environment. So more recently, I've recognized it's not just external. I had to consider cognition and behavior. And so my theory of identity has evolved from then. But more to the point, after gender-affirming surgery, I had these huge insights that, cognitively, I had these major changes where I realized myself, I had a different relationship to the universe, and I had a different relationship to myself. And a whole lot of weight that I had been carrying around just fell off of me. And so that modifies, in part, what I had to say, because I thought physicality was actually a more minor part of it. But I've had a couple of conversations, actually with Angel 7. I don't know if she would be watching on TikTok right now, but I had a conversation with her. She had a bad case of endometriosis, which saw her uterus and her ovaries removed, I believe, in her early 20s. And somebody else said this to me as well, that we are now physically identical in function. If she doesn't have a uterus, if she doesn't have ovaries, and I don't either, what is our difference in function? And so that's a place where I want to really start investigating, because I think it plays into, now I can move on to my next major topic, which is discovering and manifesting who we are. I think it plays into it. I ended up finding that I had to do a lot of introspection after I got out of gender-affirming surgery. And that was partly where I came up with, the knowledge that a lot of weight had come off of me. But introspection is sort of one of my superpowers. You could call it one of my superpowers or one of my super weaknesses. A friend of mine said it was a strength that can be overplayed. I have the ability to look very critically at myself, at my behavior, at my thoughts, which is good in some ways, because it is the first step before being able to take any action to change. But it also means that we can tear ourselves down, and you end up in a pathological place of paralysis by analysis. Well, whatever it was, you know what I'm trying to say. But how do we connect to this? How do we connect to our origin of identity to discover who we are? Because all of us learn differently. Is there a universal process of introspection? And I'm curious too, are there people who can't see outside themselves? might be. Makes me wonder, is there a dependency of a sense of self on the origin of identity? What is the dependency between them? Is the knowledge that we have in our origin, is it true? Do we know that broccoli is our favorite vegetable because it upholds a sense of self? Or is the sense of self the actual current state of knowledge and that accretion of identity in that pearl? It's an interesting thought. And I also think about, I recently spoke with an author named Jenna Tellendrew, and her books have a whole process of introspection and not just introspection, but actually modifying your behavior to make a better life for yourself. And I think those are great books. I've actually linked to Jenna in the notes. They are also rooted in her very own Avalonian tradition. So it's a tradition based on the island of Avalon in ancient Celtic myth. So that makes it distinctly feminine, and it makes it distinctly pagan. I think that's fine, but I know that there are people who would not. And so one of the thoughts that I have is maybe I could develop a general set of tools to discover and manifest identity, to explore the person we are, to consider our sense of beauty. And I've actually I've written about this, that the sense of beauty is ultimately what drives our gender identity and our sexuality. And you can see those actually on genderidentitytoday.com if you're interested in reading those. But it also drives, how do we begin to express this in our social environment? And so I've considered maybe I could make a general set of tools around it. That is really one of the big problems. How do we discover and manifest these? Now, all of this ends up being underpinned by my last big category, which is science and psychology. Very early on, I learned about a topic called evolutionary psychology. And I thought, evolutionary psychology? No, evolution is just biological. It's just genetics. But this study, evolutionary psychology, actually, it starts off as psychiatry for that matter, but we think about characteristics that humans have that were evolutionarily advantageous. And some of those were anxiety and fear, dissociative episodes, depression. These actually helped us survive. And evolution is based 100% on reproduction. If you can improve your chances of reproduction, that's evolutionarily advantageous. So we now consider these pathologies, which is kind of weird. I think to myself, if we consider them pathologies now, anxiety, dissociation, depression, are they properly classified? Are they serving us in this society, or do we create a social environment that's ultimately hostile to human nature? That's kind of a bummer to think. But I mentioned also before this sense of beauty, the idea of a sense of beauty, that this is where our gender and our sexuality come from. And I believe our sense of beauty is largely informed by social expectations. I was thinking about this most deeply when we were in Thailand, because I look at Thai culture, and it is much less about masculinity, at least as we see it in Western society. And in particular, it's men wearing makeup and looking actually very feminine. And I kept asking myself the question, hi, Ariandria. Oh, I'm sorry, Ariandria. I asked myself the question, could I have been comfortable expressing femininity, but still ultimately presenting as a man in a culture that valued feminine men? Was it my social environment that really made this such a problem? So I want to think about the effect of social environment and how that can affect very deep directions in our lives. Because I've gone through an entire social and medical transition. Could I have avoided all of that if my social environment had just been more supportive of the person I was? It's an interesting thought. And finally, to wrap all this up, I mentioned evolution, I thought was only based on genetics. So there is still, my background is genetics, my background is biology, certainly it's chemistry, data analysis. So I'm still interested in biology, genetics, biochemistry. I made a video already about the effect of hormonal balance on biochemistry, but we tend to see biology as male and female, and we want to relate male and female biology to male and female behavior. We want to see a genetic basis for all of the above pathologies. I mentioned that started as evolutionary psychiatry, which is, are there maybe neurochemical, are there biochemical reasons for us to display this behavior, to have this behavior? In which case, of course, evolutionarily, if it were an advantage, it would have been genetic. But you see, all these are very interrelated. So I'm curious. There's more research I want to do around this. Are these genetic, or is there epigenetics, which is a very, we study this, but it's kind of hard to say whether our environment really truly affects our genetics, especially does it affect it permanently? Are those heritable traits afterward? Lamarck might have had a thought about that, but I'm curious if what we've done is lost sight of the effect of society and evolution. Do we observe behavior and then continue the behavior, or is it inherited behavior? And then actually, at the end of the day, are they the same? Maybe that's the same. And then finally, my very last thing that I want to talk about in terms of science is how much has religion, particularly Christianity, contributed to the distortion of science in Western society. I made a video that I said that science is not just a collection of facts. It's a process of a series of questions. And I think what we're seeing now is religion justifying science to justify religion. I saw something recently, an article by Lilith Hellstrom on Substack, where in Genesis, in the book of Genesis, there's a translation that says God created male and female. And there are people using this passage in Genesis of male and female to prove, I'm going to put that in air quotes, to prove there are only two sexes, there are only two genders. And so it's religion actually justifying science to justify religion. It's an interesting little incestuous circle there, as it were. But I know very well especially just before the Renaissance, when you were trying not to get burned at the stake, you certainly were not going to say something that would go against Christianity, particularly the Catholic Church. And I believe that still affects the foundation of our science today. And so I'm curious where that is, because I truly believe that there are places where we have calcified the ideas in science into dogma, and that has ended up hurting, how our ability to move forward. So as far as moving forward goes, because I actually see I went about 8 minutes longer than I hoped to, those were my big problems. And I want to start thinking again in those terms so that I can further those lines of thought. As it pertains to my own content, I'm just continuing to refine what I've written about running on 2 years now, which is kind of a good thing. I revisited all of my big problems and I said, I'm not really changing a lot of them. So I felt good about that. But the medium of video has given me some good new tools. And I think it gives me the ability to interweave what I write with what I film. So to now sort of summarize with my 3 big buckets of content, the origin of identity, I think I'll continue to explore in written articles, my philosophical kind of written articles. And these live streams, if this was not 29 minutes of obvious, proof, these tend to be somewhat contemplative, long form, less practical bits of content. When we go into discovering and manifesting our identity, I have a podcast that comes out every Friday. At least I started again this past Friday. I think I saw Queerly Attached join. If she's still here, that's who was actually on the podcast on Friday. So hi, Kylie. Hi. But the podcast generally talks to people about their lives. And it's a matter of how do we discover this about, there we go. Hey, Kylie. It's a matter of how do we discover this and how do we end up manifesting the person we know we are in our lives. So we have the podcast there. And I know I have practical educational videos that I intended to make. There was one about bra size and breast augmentation that I've intended to do for about 6 weeks, and we're still here. But I also thought about making videos about the tools that I'm using for introspection. Science and psychology continues to act as inspiration for me. That will continue to play into my written articles. And certainly more theoretical educational videos. I know that there is a tremendous misunderstanding of what genetics provides to the human, what part it plays in our existence, especially as it plays into biochemistry. And so I think that there's more that, to be explored there. Now that I've hit about 30 minutes here, I also want to say, just what would you want to read and see? I mean, hopefully, as I've gone through everything that I've talked about, maybe you'll go, yeah, that sounds like an interesting thought. I'd love to see you explore that because it applies to me in this particular way. So I will say again, if you go to amethysta.io, or if you look at the link in my bio, there is a link to amethysta.io with a contact page. So contact me and tell me. I'd love to hear what you'd like to see and what you'd like to read. So with that, I've gone through everything I wanted to talk about. If there's any comments or questions that you'd like me to address now, I will. Otherwise, it's been 30 minutes and I'm willing to shut down anytime. So I'm going to take a drink of water. And when I'm finished with my drink of water, if there's something to talk about, I'll talk about it. Otherwise, cool. By the way, I'm really bummed. My purple water bottle used to show up in every single video. But as we were coming home from Thailand, we were like running because we went to LAX. I can't believe I'm telling this story, but I'm going to. So we were running through LAX, okay? So Los Angeles International Airport, because we came in through International and we had to go to like the farthest gate in the entire airport because that's how, airports do things. So we're going through security. I have not emptied my water bottle. And so they said, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to go back outside and then come back through the whole line, or do you want to throw it away? And I'm like, yeah, throw it away. My lovely purple bottle that now does not appear in any videos. I'm pretty bummed. I think that's it for that story. All right. I think that's about it. I just want to say thank you to everybody who joined, who's watching, who's commented. Truly appreciate it. Truly appreciate all of your support. Thank you. Truly appreciate all of your support. Thank you for proving to me that going away for a week doesn't hurt me, because that's been my belief for my entire career. So thank you, Laura Jean. Thank you, Kylie. Thank you, Ariandria. Everybody on YouTube, TikTok, Twitch. Thank you again. I'll do the little heart. All right. Bye. Oh, by the way, super quick thing too. Last week, September 11th, which was a bit of a somber day, and this is part of why I didn't make the piece of content, but September 11th was my 2-month, that's not anniversary, but it's been 2 months since I got surgery. So I have an update there that I will post on Monday. And so I guess, I don't know, look forward to that. Okay. Thanks. Bye.